Welcome to Talent Matters, the podcast where talent, skills, and grit take centre stage. I'm your host, Donal O'Donoghue, and this is episode 9. The podcast is sponsored by Sanderson, talent solutions that transform businesses globally, and Finero, the multi-award-winning tax experts who support financial success for contractors, freelancers, and solopreneurs. Now, in this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by All-Ireland winner, author, and TV personality, Anna Geary. You're welcome.
Thank you, Donal. Love to be on the podcast.
It's great to have you here. So, as you know, the podcast is all about talent and skill acquisition and all that good stuff. So we like to start off with what kind of kid you were. What were your early talents and what were you into?
I was a very energetic child for sure. And I suppose really sport was something that I was put into. It didn't really matter with the talent. I think when you're from a small rural village, kids are put into sport from a social point of view, but also as well because, it's important to have pastimes and there isn't a whole pile of things to choose from. So I was thrown into the world of sport and, my mum and my dad in particular was always such a lover of sport. So I would have played, camogie, would have played a bit of Gaelic football, would have even athletics would have been something that would have been part of a running club, North Cork AC. And I think very earlier on, that's what a lot of my time was spent doing. Now, look, I was also, part of the Girl Guides and I was part of the Ceoltas in our local village as well. But it was really sport is what kind of gripped me from an early age.
And very much the GAA, or was it any sport, whatever was on at the time?
I suppose really GAA is what was available to me, that and athletics. But, I loved playing out in the back garden. It wouldn't matter what it was. It could have been put the jumpers down, we'll have a game of soccer, we'll have a game of, rounders or, crazy golf. But I suppose really what I was playing was camogie. And I wasn't particularly very good as a young girl. I would say probably it wasn't until I went into secondary school that the flair for camogie really started to develop. I always had the determination to try and get there, but I suppose maybe the skills and maybe the potential hadn't quite been realised. But then when I went into secondary school, I suppose the confidence came a bit more, and with the confidence then the skills grew.
Very good. For anyone that's watching or listening from outside Ireland, how would you describe camogie as a sport?
Camogie is a combination of field hockey and lacrosse, but probably less rules. It is quite a physical game. It's physically demanding. It is technical as well to a point. There is, I suppose, lots of things to be aware of. It's like driving a car. There's so many different components, but then when everything kind of clicks and it fits into place, it's just free flowing. Camogie and obviously hurling are the fastest field sports in the world. And I suppose for me, I loved the exhilaration of being in the middle of a really good game, playing against a really good opposition, having to be at your best, having to be concentrating. It didn't matter if you were winning or losing, but just that feeling of being in the middle of a match and just nothing else mattered. It was all about the game and you had to be really, really present and really, really focused on what you were doing. And no matter what was going on in your life around you, whether that was school or as I got older, work and it was just all about what was happening on the pitch. And I found that excellent really for mental health. Now looking back, I didn't realise at the time that's what it was actually doing, but it's really good. I suppose even mindfulness as well, because you're focusing on the task at hand. And I love the competitive aspect of it as well.
And camogie and hurling are amateur sports in Ireland, but played at a very, very high level. So what was the commitment as you were kind of hitting secondary school and you're trying to balance your studies and the amount of training? What level of training were you doing at that stage?
As I got older, I suppose as I went into secondary school, I was picked for the school's team, and at the same time I was going for trials with Cork, and I remember making the Cork under 14 team, and then I think I was 12 on the Cork under 14 team. I was 13 on the Cork under 16 and 18 team, and then by the time I was 16 I was playing with the Cork senior camogie panel. And of course, as you get older and depending on the team, the level of commitment does increase. But I suppose so did my level of interest, so did my level of passion, so did my willingness to improve. So I never really saw the commitment as a sacrifice. I never really thought about the things that I was, missing out on. Because for me, I was just so I was so caught up in the game, you know, and I loved it. And I loved, I suppose, the buzz around it. I loved my teammates. I suppose I loved that collaborative effort that comes from team sport. And look, there was hard days as well. There was times when I didn't get picked for teams, and there was times where, you know, I underperformed and was, you know, going through the proverbial rough patch, but it still didn't deter my love for the game, because it genuinely gave me so much. And I remember actually going into secondary school and there being a trial for the schools team. And I remember them posting up the, you know, the A panel and the B panel. And a lot of my friends at the time made the A panel automatically, and I didn't. I remember I made the B panel. And I remember coming home being so upset about it. And it wasn't even that I made the B panel, it was more that all my friends were playing the A. And as a 13-year-old, you know, being separated from your friends is very difficult. But I remember my dad kind of saying, what are you going to do about it? I remember putting the head down and, you know, making the best of what I could on the B, and turning up to training with a really positive attitude, just playing as well as I could, and getting the call up then a few months later by the manager to the A panel. And very quickly went from just sitting on the subs to playing at the team. And then like that, the following year progressed onto the senior team. And I remember thinking afterwards, like, I know I suppose the podcast is Talent Matters. But one of the things that I learned at that age that stuck with me right throughout my life is hard work will beat talent if talent doesn't work hard.
Absolutely.
So having talent is great, but it's the work ethic for me. And once you learn that work ethic, you'll have that then, no matter it's sport, work, college, even relationships. Once you develop that, I think, and I learned that thankfully really early on, that stood to me since.
Yeah, and that's really what the podcast is all about, because I totally agree with you. It's, you know, that initial talent or interest or obsession with, you know, whatever it is your niche is, only gets you to the table. It's the grit and the determination and the resilience. And actually, it's really interesting because there's a lot of people that are successful in business or in sport that it doesn't come easy to them, you know, and it's that extra bit of resilience and that extra bit of work. And so I think you're spot on. What type of student were you when you were in school?
Diligent. I was diligent. I always wanted to do my best. And possibly there was a little bit of the competitive instinct in me wanting to be top of the class, as you know, if I could. There was a little bit of ego there as well. Always wanting, I suppose, that you're seeking to try and be the best. But I think for me as well, I think potential is something that all of us have, and sometimes we're kind of afraid of it. We're afraid to work towards something that we really want in case we come up short. You know, so it's easier to say, I'm sure if I tried a bit harder, I could have got it. If I'd studied a bit harder, I could have got the A. If I'd worked a bit harder, I could have, you know, made the team. But I kind of felt, you know what, I may as well try, because I'll never know if I always in school, I did try and push myself. And it wasn't a pressure that came from, you know, from my parents or anything. It largely was for me. And I think at times I probably put too much pressure on myself, but sport really helped, because sport made me seek out a balance. Because even in my leaving cert year, I was going up training with the Cork Camogie team 3 times a week. It was about an hour and a half away from training each way, which is a 3-hour round trip. So I'd come home from school. I might have an hour and a half before I went to training, had to do as much homework as I could. Then went up to training, trained for maybe an hour and a half, got back in the car, came home, finished my homework, went to bed, and did that. Like, I have to really shout at my mum, because she was like the taxi driver driving me up and down as well. It was as much her commitment as it was mine. But it made me really good with my time, and realize, okay, like you have to give as much as you can to schoolwork, but then you have to take a break, and getting outside and getting active.
So true,
so
isn't
important.
it? And it's that
and
whole...
often people in leaving cert or in your exam years, they tend to move away from sport or give up sport because they feel, but if anything, I'm so thankful that the results that I got, was even my leaving cert, were in no small way due to the fact that I was taking the breaks for sport and getting outside and getting moving. Because, I mean, that's like miracle grow for your brain.
Yeah, it's so important. And actually, that's one of the big challenges, isn't it? Particularly with women in sport, is that during those teenage years when pressure for exams comes on, you can have a lot of attrition. And if people stop being in that habit to continue with sport, they're less likely to continue in later life. So going back to the school days, what did you think you would do as a career?
I wasn't quite sure. Like, I think, like a lot of people, I I jumped from many different things. Sonia Sullivan was always somebody that I massively admired. So there was a part of me that would love to have. He was like, "Oh, I want to be a professional runner," and then I very quickly realized genetically I wasn't designed for long distance running like Sonia. There was a time where I wanted to be an extra member of the Spice Girls, but I realized I didn't quite have the singing ability. One of the things that did always captivate me and grab my interest was watching the likes, say, of Gay Byrne and the Late Late. How, he would sit like we are with somebody, delving into their life, into their interests, storytelling, and calling it a job. Because, often I'd be getting in trouble in school for talking. I'm like, my God, how can I make this a career? Did I ever think I was actually going to be a broadcaster on TV and radio? No, I didn't. I thought it was a kind of an aspirational dream, but it was something that I always interested me. I love the energy that comes from people. And, when two people are having a really engaging conversation and you're witness to it, there's such a brilliant energy that comes from that. So it was always something that I suppose really that did grab my attention. But I suppose now, years on, looking back at it and realizing, God, kind of wanted this, and in a roundabout way, I took the scenic route to get here. But I'm sitting here now, thankfully, and saying
and
that
it kind of takes that bit of courage as well, doesn't it? And it's similar to the courage that you need to compete in sport, but to be willing to put yourself into a position, particularly where you're live broadcasting, there's a certain amount of pressure, and that does need an element of courage and bravery, doesn't it?
I'm really thankful to sport actually for teaching me about courage, and even teaching me about success. Because really, if you think about it, like a lot of people think, being successful is about winning. But actually, no, being successful is being courageous enough to take the step towards whatever it is, whether that's going for the ball, going for the job, going for the relationship. That's where the success is actually having that courage. And that's because it's really hard. Like when kids are younger, if you think about it, you're always telling me, oh, it's about trying. You're going, keep trying, keep going. If they're trying to learn to ride a bike, keep going. You're falling down 100 times. Keep going, get back up again. Where somewhere along the line, I think the line gets blurred. As adults then, we're nearly told that trying isn't good enough. It's about all or nothing. You either get there, the fear of not getting there is enough to stop people in their tracks. But it's like failing or making mistakes or falling short isn't a weakness. It's actually, it's something that should be celebrated nearly, because getting out of your comfort zone, being brave enough to try new things, being courageous enough, that's actually something that we should all be celebrating a lot more. It's not necessarily just about who's winning. It's about actually all of that stuff as well. And I think for me, I was really lucky that sport taught me that, so that I was actually able to have the courage then. And even now, taking on new challenges and things, I suppose I equate that to the skills that I learned from sport.
And you've taken on a new challenge with the book, and you shared some really good news with me just before we went live. So how is the book doing?
Yeah, thankfully I just found out that it was the number one best-selling non-fiction book across Ireland. So
Brilliant.
Yeah, I just found out that this week. So that was just wonderful. It really was. Now it wasn't the reason why I wrote the book, but obviously when you do write a book and pour your heart and your soul into it, and to get the feedback from people first and foremost that they're enjoying it, like that was the main thing. But then to hear that people were supporting it and that they were getting behind it and reading it, I suppose that made all the sleepless nights worthwhile.
Brilliant. So tell us a little bit about it. It's called Anna's Game Plan.
Yes.
Why did you write it?
It's Anna's Game Plan, but it's not a sports book. I think sometimes people think, oh, I'm not into sport. It's a nod to my sports career, but I suppose everybody needs a game plan for life. It's like your action plan as such. And the main reason why I wrote it all is actually to help people. That's really what it is. Like, I suppose I realized that a lot of the things that I've experienced in life, whether it's through sport, through work, or even just life in general, it's like, I've had to learn some hard lessons. I've gone through some really difficult times. I've learned and experienced some really positive things as well. I was like, what I've learned and what I've gone through and the tools that I use, maybe they can help other people. And I think in the last few years, whether it was coming out of COVID and lockdown, and even the world of social media and the pressures and the expectations that are placed upon people, people can nearly feel stifled, and they can feel stuck and nearly, I guess they're like their flair or their mojo is gone. So what I was like, if I can help people, to find their way back, or maybe to uncover something that they never knew about themselves, I was like, that's why I wrote the book. And it really is just like a helping hand for people to navigate through their life, whatever they're going through.
Yeah, so there's an element, I wouldn't like to say a self-help book. It's not a self-help book, but there is an element of kind of personal empowerment. And I quite liked, I think you mentioned early on where you kind of almost second guessed yourself about, writing it and thinking, are people going to say, who does she think she is to write this book? So tell us a little bit about that and those kind of, how you managed that kind of process.
Like, I think a lot of people have imposter syndrome in some way, shape or form. And definitely mine came to the fore writing the book because, I don't have...
Well, you're putting yourself out there, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't have a journalism background. I don't have a degree in writing. And, really my main mode of communication has always been, behind a mic or in TV camera, the verbal communication. So to sit down and write, certainly it's more challenging because you have to make the words jump off the page. You have to find a way to put your energy, to put, that, sometimes it's gravitas or sometimes it's sincerity into the words to, I suppose, for them to speak to people. Whereas often it's easier to do it, verbally. And I definitely was out of my comfort zone. Like, and when I said earlier on about the sleepless nights, I'm not joking. Like, there was nights where I'd be lying in bed and my husband would nearly be able to hear me thinking, what are you thinking about? Like, just wasn't happy with that last 1,000 words that I wrote. I'm just going to get up and change it. I've just got an idea or something. I was sending him, I found it really good to go on long walks. So it would be a place where, away from all the to-do list, away from the house and all the jobs, away from everything, where I could think and just get a bit of clarity. And often the creative juices would nearly start flowing then. So I couldn't obviously write at that time because I didn't have a laptop. So I would send my husband voice notes. And it would be like my thoughts. Now, some of these voice notes were like podcasts, to be honest. But it was a really good way for me to start putting things together in my mind. And, maybe that story will feed into, about negative criticism. And, maybe I can go back to that time when I got dropped from the team and how I reacted. And, I used this tool and just everything trying to, I suppose, put it all together. And yeah, like seeing all of the work in between the two covers now, it is quite surreal and quite emotional, to be honest, because like you said, you're putting yourself out there. It's a very vulnerable place to be. And probably in some ways, it was probably one of the most courageous things that I've ever done because I wasn't quite sure how it was going to turn out. But that's for a lot of people when you step out of your comfort zone. You kind of don't know how it's going to turn out. But there's, you can look at that in a really scary way, in a negative way, or you can flip it and actually look at it in quite a positive way and say, that idea of what if I fall? But what if you fly? It's like, oh yeah, what if nobody buys the book? Or what if it turns out to be better than you'd ever expected it to be? So I think it's just that mindset shift. And I talk a lot about that, about the idea about how we can all shift our mindset and change how we think. And I think giving people that power and knowing that you can, no matter what you're facing in your life, that you actually have the power to change your mindset is, it's a gift in some ways, because a sport gave it to me. One of the greatest gifts that I ever learned from sport was you have control of your mindset. You can't control the ref, you can't control the weather, you can't control the opposition, but your mindset, you can control that, you can train it. And
I love that. I loved when you talked about the power of saying yes, which is an interesting concept because you've kind of tied different themes through the book that you've obviously used throughout your broadcast and your sports career. So tell us a little about that, like that idea of the power of, I suppose, saying yes to opportunities.
Yeah, so we hear a lot about learning to say no. And it is very important that we all have our boundaries. And, and often, the people pleaser in all of us will want to say yes to things for fear of letting other people down or for fear of what people will say, either to our face or behind our back. But often we don't think about the power of saying yes. And I think it's nearly a protection mechanism in a lot of us to say no to something. Because again, it goes back to, what if it doesn't work out? Or what if I'm not good at it? So I'll just say no and I'll shut it down. But like when you're saying no to it, you're almost like cutting off the opportunity to maybe be really good at something, or maybe to go on the Tinder date and find the love of your life, or to say yes to a job interview that ends up being your dream job, whatever it is. So it is that idea about learning how to say yes, and it's a habit, just like anything else, like training your body and building your muscles. If you want to try and step out of your comfort zone, that you have to start really small. So maybe that is saying yes to replacing your morning coffee with something else, if you're having too many coffees in a day. But what it's actually doing is it's training your brain. You're building a habit and you're getting used to saying yes more and more. So by saying yes to the smaller things, you'll actually learn and you'll be in a position then to say yes to the bigger things when they come along. So I have an exercise called the 365 yeses. It's very simply every single day, you say yes to one thing that your default would be to say no to. And that's something as simple as maybe taking the stairs instead of the lift. Maybe when you're doing your grocery shopping that you pick up a vegetable that you would never ever buy and you bring it home and you learn how to cook it. Again, like that, saying yes to the Tinder date. It's small little things. Somebody actually, a woman messaged me recently and she said when she was reading the book, she said yes to drinking her tea out of the good cups. Because, think of it. We all had maybe the good room growing up, the good cutlery, the good clothes, the good biscuits for the visitors, the good cups. And she said she always kept this set of china in her press for when the visitors called. But when the visitors called, none of them even wanted the china cups because they were all afraid of breaking the menu. Oh no, just give me a mug. I'll be grand. So she said she wasn't using them and she was keeping them for a good day. So she said yes to using the good china. And it was very funny at the very end. And you know what? Tea does taste better out of a china cup. And I just thought that was a really small but very significant practical thing that she did say yes to enhance the quality of her life. Because that's really what I want from this book is it's the small tweaks. I call them tweaks in the book because it's not about big changes. The word change freaks people out. Like it's, because it's this idea of this big, huge thing. And even the idea of improvements, that also, whereas a tweak is something, it just could be a turn of the dial. But if that can enhance your life and you can start doing it today with minimum effort, well, if you can put multiple ones of those in incrementally over time, that will build up. And I think that's what I really wanted people to do, is to understand, again, go back to having the power to be in control of their life more than they actually realize.
And you gave the example, I suppose, as well, where saying yes to that move into broadcasting or the move into TV. So what was the first TV opportunity that kind of crossed your path after, I suppose, because your profile developed through sport and through Cork Kogie, but what was the first kind of TV opportunity that crossed your path?
So when my retirement, that word, even when you say retirement, I was only 27 at the time, and I hadn't retired from sport entirely. It was just from Cork. When I stepped back, we'll say, from sport, the producer of Ireland's Fittest Family contacted me and asked me, would I be interested in being a coach? And I watched the show and I really enjoyed it. But going back to the default, my default was say, I'm going to say no to this, because people will say, who does she think she is, being a coach? And then I started, the self-critical voice. But sure, you've never coached before. Oh God, what if you make a mess of it? What if you're no good? And all of these things. And I said, you know what? You could listen to all of the reasons to not do something. Or you could just tune into the reasons that you actually want to do it. And the reason for me was I liked the show. I loved what it was about. It was bringing families together, like coaching them, seeing if you could, help them to get to the next stage in their fitness, or, become more confident, or feel that, oh yeah, actually I can do this. And if I was part, I was like, well, why wouldn't I say yes to that opportunity? So I did. And I mean, like 10 years later, I'm looking forward to getting back. Like I was absent last summer because I had my little baby boy, but I've reinvigorated that passion now, and I can't wait to go back filming this year. And that was really, I suppose, my first taste of TV. And very soon, actually, after that, I would have been asked onto the Sunday game to do the analysis for the All-Ireland finals. And Cork were in the All-Ireland final. A lot of those girls, my teammates 12 months previous when I was captain, and they were playing the same team as me. So that was quite challenging, because I suppose I still missed the buzz of the game. I still loved playing camogie. I was still playing with my club and we were still doing really well. And I suppose that was particularly difficult, sitting there watching them running out onto the pitch in Croke Park, knowing I was no longer a part of it.
It's a strange feeling,
yeah,
isn't it?
it was. It was definitely a strange feeling. I think I probably came out of retirement in my head going, oh, I'd love to be back there. But in some ways, broadcasting, and particularly live broadcasting, it gives me a similar rush. It's never going to fully replace running out in Croke Park on All-Ireland final day. But really, when it comes to broadcasting, when they say you're going live, 3, 2, 1, like that's it. You're in it. You have to be focused. You're going to make mistakes, just like in sport, but you have to keep going. There's no such thing as, well, actually stop, let's start all over again. It's not how it works. And you kind of just, you have to be content with, you're never going to be perfect. There's never going to be a perfect performance in broadcasting, just like there's never going to be a perfect performance in sport. And again, I suppose really going back to that skill set that I learned from sport, it is about whatever happens, coping with it and moving on, adapt and move on. And I think that's what's been really good, even whether it was on Dancing with the Stars and having to get the criticisms from the judges. I'm used to that as a manager, telling you what you didn't do right in a match. You take it, you learn from it, you move on. Same with, Fittest Family, when, obstacle courses didn't go right. You take the feedback, you move on. And thankfully in radio and TV, it's been the same. But really the foundation for a lot, really, I suppose, for who I am as a person and the skills that I've learned and the talent that I've built has come actually from gracing the playing pitches for the bones of 2 decades.
Brilliant. You did the Late Late Show, which is our largest talk show in Ireland, and you were brilliant. And actually I have to give a shout out to my stepdaughter Jodie, because the day after you were on the Late Late Show, we were out for lunch in Salons and Jodie went up and got a selfie with you, and she's a huge fan of yours and that is her WhatsApp profile picture, and she absolutely loves it. But you shared quite a bit on the tough year, or the tough 2 years that you had between losing your dad and your brother in a very short period of time, and then the joy of the baby coming along. What was that couple of years like?
The highest of highs and the lowest of lows is the truth. And I think nothing can really prepare you for losing anybody in your life, but particularly 2 of your immediate family in such a short space of time. And I think having Ronan in the middle of it, it was energy zapping, obviously, as anybody that has a newborn knows, but also he gave me perspective. And he also gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and I suppose I'm really lucky that I did have him to focus on. And I suppose really grief and having to sit in grief and live with grief has given me perspective as well, because, I think, Donal, like a lot of people sweat the small stuff, including me. I'm working at it now, I suppose, and life has taught me that really, when you look back, if you're stressing about something at the moment, whatever it is, just ask yourself, in 12 months' time, will this actually really matter? Now, if it will, okay, figure it out. But a lot of the time, it doesn't. People with stress go, "Oh, I don't want to go to this event, or I don't want to say yes to this breakfast that I said I was go to," and you're stressing about, how do I say no to this person? In a year, will it matter? No. Oh God, I'm not fitting into my jeans at the moment. Oh God, in a year, will it matter? And it's even asking yourself that and checking it, because we waste so much energy worrying about really things that aren't important in our lives. And then one day on a random Tuesday, you're blindsided by something that changes your life forever. And that's what's important. And if that's draining your energy, well, you know what? It needs it, because it's such a big thing in your life. But it did make me realize that actually I am someone that overthinks things. I am somebody that sometimes worries about things that really aren't important. And it helped me to get back to what's important now. That acronym WIN, what's important now. And it did help me, unfortunately, to have to go through it and to have to experience grief. I'm trying to take what I can from it. And it is really giving me that fresh lens to look at life at, because nobody knows.
You don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah.
In terms of what's important to you, what are your values? What's, when you think about what makes you happy and how you define success, what do you really value in life?
Values is a really funny thing. And I talk about values actually in the book. There's an exercise how to figure out what your values are, because I think we hear values being thrown around: honesty, loyalty, kindness. But often people don't take the time to actually figure out what their values are. And everyone is so individual. So what Mary down the road, or your sister-in-law, or your partner values isn't necessarily yours. It's really what makes you tick, like what gets you out of bed. And for a long time, I really don't think I paid attention to what my values were. But I suppose really the catalyst for me retiring from Cork was going back and qualifying as a performance and executive coach. Now, really, I only did it from a personal development point of view, because I was very interested in, I suppose, exploring the mind a bit more and mindset, and saying, oh, actually, what else can I learn? But one of the biggest things that it made me do was actually figure out my values. And I suppose two of my core values would be connection. So no matter what I'm doing in life, whether it's in, relationships or whether it's in work, it's people, but it's the right people. Like how many of us surround ourselves with people that might be a bit toxic, might be a bit negative in our lives, mightn't necessarily make us feel great. And maybe out of a weird sense of loyalty or because you've known them since you were 4, you kind of hang around with them. But when you meet your people or when you're in a room with the right people that elevate you, that make you feel good, as I call them, energy trains, those people, they're worth their weight in gold. And to figure out for me that I was like, okay, connection is really important, but real connection. And when you meet people that you really connect with, it's leaning into those relationships a bit more and leaning into maybe the jobs that give you an opportunity to be around those people more. And I suppose another core value is legacy. And it's about leaving my stamp on the world, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a big stamp, but just something. And I suppose that was one of the reasons why I wrote the book as well, is because I wanted to put my 2 cents out there to maybe help somebody that's going through something in their life. And maybe they haven't thought about it in a certain way and that they'll read and go, maybe I'll try that. So it was about building a legacy for me. And it's about doing what I want to do and not what I should be doing. So, I did the business degree and I went out and I worked for 7-8 years in the corporate environment, and I worked in lots of different roles. I worked in sales and recruitment, worked in marketing, great jobs, great roles, but not necessarily great for me. I never really felt that I quite was able to be fully myself and tap into my own real talents and natural skill set. So I suppose the world of media allows me to do that, lean into my personality, lean into what I feel are my skills more than previous roles. Now, I learned something along from all of them, but, and again, going back to the legacy, what do I want my legacy to be? Do I want to be 80 years old, lying in bed, seeing out the last of my days thinking, I wish I did that. I wish I tried that. And it's almost like going, what is it you're afraid of? Like, what's standing in your way? And often what's standing in your way is yourself. It's your insecurities, it's the doubt. And it's like, well, if you removed that, what would you be doing? And when I started asking myself that question, I was like, well, actually, my legacy would be built around trying to work in media, trying to work as a coach, trying to help people, whether it's in sports teams or whether it's in companies, and speaking with them and connecting with them and leaving my legacy. So going back all the time now to those core values. And I do that a lot with my job. It's like, and even with relationships. Like if I'm investing energy into something, do I feel truly connected? And do I feel that this is having a positive imprint on the world? And if it's yes to both of those things, we'll then drive on. And if it's not, reevaluate.
Coming back to relationships, you've got a new series coming out of Love in the Country. Again, for anyone that's not familiar with it, summarize the show, would you? What's it about?
Yeah, Love in the Country it's finding love, it's finding that special someone. There's a particular focus was on rural Ireland because, as we know now, I suppose the social scene is deteriorating in some rural parts of Ireland. It's, your local pub isn't necessarily the hub as what it used to be. There isn't necessarily maybe a nightclub or a social scene close by, and
I don't think people talk to each other the way they used to years ago as well, particularly with all the dating apps and... True,
and often people are, even if you're waiting at a bus stop now, your head is in a phone. If you're waiting to queue to get breakfast, your head is in your phone. And I'm not saying your head, I'm also like including myself in that. It is a habit that we whip out the phone instead of maybe just looking around, and maybe the love of your life has walked past, but you're too busy with your head in your phone to even notice. So I suppose what Love in the Country is, it's an international format. Farmer Wants a Wife is what it might be known as all over the world.
Okay.
But in Ireland, we've changed the name to Love in the Country, and it is about helping people. I'm almost like a wing woman of sorts, helping people to meet that special someone. But it goes back, I suppose, to more traditional ways. So it's not about your dating apps. It's about, there's a digital profile that the love hopefuls put up, and then you write them a letter based on what you see, and maybe they have similar interests to you, or maybe they catch your eye for aesthetic reasons and whatever it is, and you write them a letter. Then I'll deliver all the letters to them. They go through them. They'll pick people that they go on speed dates with, and then from there they'll pick a handful of people that they invite back to where they live. And because often for people, particularly in rural Ireland, whether you were a farmer, whether you own the local butchers in the village, you're a school principal, you can't up and leave your area and travel an hour down the road to meet someone. You're kind of tied. You're tied to the land, so to speak. So it's about bringing them to you. So they come home then and spend a weekend at your home. But I suppose the catch with the show and why it's brilliant to watch is that everyone that you pick comes back to spend time with you at the same time. So you'll see nearly the elbows coming out. Everyone starts to get competitive. Everybody wants to be the person that's picked. But what's also lovely as well is often it's really scary to go on a date in your own with someone. You know that awkwardness where you're one to one, you're like, oh, what am I going to say to them? Whereas actually when you're in a more of a group setting and there's 3 or 4 people, it's more relaxed. Now we obviously get to spend time one-on-one with the people too. But sometimes people say it's easier for them to kind of be themselves when it's a bigger group because they're not as shy when it's just than would be in a one-to-one setting. But last year was the first year of it and we're back for series 2. We're actually currently casting. So men and women, particularly the men of Ireland, you're a little bit shyer to put yourselves out there. Maybe you know somebody that needs a gentle nudge.
Who has a bit of road frontage.
Yeah, who has a bit of road frontage or maybe they have the local butchers or whatever it is. Maybe that's what you say yes to in 2024. We're talking about saying yes. Maybe that's what you say yes to because at best you're going to find a partner. And at very worst, you're going to make great memories because it is a brilliant show to do. So
were there any success stories last year? Are the people still together?
Yeah, there absolutely was. Now I haven't in the last few weeks, unless something has changed, but there was, and it was very evident actually from quite earlier on. You could see the physical chemistry, but you could also see as well they clicked. They were at a similar place in life. They both wanted similar things. They wanted to start a family. They wanted to progress, and that's what you want. You want to meet people, and sometimes, if you've exhausted the ways that you're always using and they're not working out, well, then you need to say to yourself, well, maybe I'll try something new. And maybe loving the country is that's something new, you know. But it's a great privilege for me to be there along the way with people because I suppose even as a coach, sometimes you have to remind people of all the things they're good at because we're so quick to point out our own flaws. But we actually we're not as comfortable pointing out our strengths and our talent and, you know, what we have going for us, as they say. So that was my job then. Actually, you know what? You know, you are good looking and you have a great personality and you have great energy and, you know, lean into that and remind yourself of it. And it's brilliant to see people then when they, you know, the little spark that happens and the butterflies happen and they maybe go a bit shy. It's lovely when that clicks then as well. So it's, I love presenting the show. It's a real honor, really.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it. So in terms of what's on the horizon for you, the book is obviously flying.
Yeah.
And you've the new series coming out. What other goals do you have over the next while? What can we look forward to?
Yes, so Ireland's Fittest Family is back as well, and which is great. And I'm really looking forward to getting back into that and getting my claws back into the coaches as much as anything else. But like really, I would love to, I suppose, get out of my own way at times and say yes to opportunities and not be so afraid of what, you know, might happen. And so I really want to, I suppose, like that, progress and grow as a broadcaster and have, you know, the opportunity to lean into that a bit more. But more than anything else, right? More than from a work perspective or from career aspirations, because I have ambitions like a lot of other people, and I'm sure like a lot of people listening. I think I need to actually press pause a bit more, you know, because in the hustle of life and in the rat race, there is it to get ahead, the productivity contests that we all seem to be in. Sometimes it's like you'll set yourself a goal and then you'll get to it and you hardly acknowledge it. Next, right? Tick, next. And I am guilty of doing that. And I know I am. So I'm really trying to work hard and actually just having down days. You know, my nana used to always say, wasting time is not time wasted. I never quite understood it until recently. And I find it really hard to do nothing. I love the idea of it. And then I'll have a day off. And I'll nearly sit there feeling, oh, am I being lazy?
Should be doing something.
Am I being lazy by not changing out of my pajamas or not cleaning the kitchen or doing the washing up or whatever? So it's actually allowing myself the time to do that. And I think again with Ronan, he's 8 months old, you know, we'll never get this time back with him. So maybe it is about leaving the washing to be done another day or leaving the dirty dishes in the sink and actually playing with him and being in the moment a bit more. I think I'm really, you know, I'm focusing on that because I know life can throw things at you that are really difficult. So it's almost like giving yourself permission then to enjoy the small moments a little, because they're actually, as they say, the small moments end up being the big moments. So I'm trying really hard. It's a work in progress. I haven't quite nailed it yet. To live life and actually not be always trying to figure out what can I do to be productive. To just enjoy.
In the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Have the coffee and the almond croissant and the pajamas in the middle of the day, surrounded by the mess. And so what? Because your favourite movies just don't come on television. You said, I'm going to watch that today. I'm trying to just, tune into that a little bit more, because that's just as important for you as ticking off all of the goals in the to-do list of trying to improve, of trying to grow your skills. Actually sitting back and resting. Like I often say to people, if you think about your phone, if you didn't plug your phone in every evening, it would go dead. When do we plug ourselves in? We often don't take enough time to plug ourselves in. And then we're wondering why we're going around the place exhausted, why we're demotivated, why we don't want to train, because we actually haven't recharged. So it's finding out what recharges you. For some people, that's exercise. I love going for a walk. I'll always feel better after it. Feel better after ringing my best friend. So for somebody, it could be, dancing around their kitchen to their, to AC/DC, or going out for a coffee with, somebody, whatever it is, finding what recharges you and doing that more. I think that's just as important as getting to the to-do list.
I think that is a brilliant place to leave it. That's a really good answer. And what I'm going to do is we're going to include in the show notes a link to the book, because I think it's really powerful. And I think what you've done, particularly in the past few months, promoting the book and sharing your story, the highs, lows and learnings along the way, I think in a really authentic way has helped a lot of people. So I want to say thank you, and thank you for coming in and doing this. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube, follow us on Instagram. It's @talentmatters_podcast. And we'll put a link to Anna's book. It's called Anna's Game Plan, and it's really worth a read. So thanks.
Thanks, Donal. Thanks, great chat.